Yeah. So once again, hello everyone. This is Prajit Datta from Hyperledger Sweden, and we are doing our webinar on Hyperledger and its projects. We are doing an overview of that. So before that, let me introduce about myself. Um, I am a blockchain developer since 2016. Have an experience with Fabric, Indy, Sawtooth, and Aries. I work for a consulting firm, one of the Scandinavian consulting giant, AFRI. I've been into the blockchain evangelism since around close to now 4 years now. So let me give a quick walkthrough of today's agenda. So first 10 minutes, I will talk about Swedish blockchain market. And then the next 15 minutes, Mr. Raymond Molnar from AFRI, he will talk about blockchain for business in hydropower and energy sector. And the last half an hour from 18:30 to 19, Marta Pierkarska, she will be taking up the overview of Hyperledger and projects. She's the director of ecosystem, and I hope everyone in the community knows about her. So let's talk more about Sweden here. So I don't know how many of you have been to Sweden. This is a picture, a beautiful picture from Stockholm. Sweden, one of the countries in Scandinavia. There are so many different, they are like leaders in different sectors, like an automobile. We have Volvo, Scania, Koenigsegg, heavy motor industries, and all. They are like the leaders. They're also playing with blockchain. They're also deploying blockchain to provide some sustainable chain, or to provide a sustainable solutions, because sustainability is one of the big concepts coming up in the Nordic region. Also, they are looking for blockchain in terms of semantic web deployments. In terms of when we are talking about autonomous vehicle, then we talk about owner or the rental mode. So maybe a blockchain can be a good solution for that. So yes, automobile industries are doing a lot with blockchain here in Sweden. Coming to our next sector, which is manufacturing. Manufacturing is, you might be knowing about the company OBB, what in English we say it ABB, SAB, maybe, yeah. They are one of the, again, manufacturing giants, and they are also looking into the blockchain solutions, especially for the supply chain network and all. Third, healthcare. Whether you know about AstraZeneca, Monlike Healthcare, they are the leading companies in the healthcare industries. They're also looking into the blockchain solutions to keep track of the medical records and a lot of production of the medicines and all. So they are actually looking into the opportunities. Retail, again, common use case for a lot of the countries, and a lot of the countries' retail industry is also looking into the blockchain opportunity. The same here in Sweden too. We have got ICA, we have got Coop, Hemshop, another retail industry, maybe some of the brand, the furniture industry, IKEA, what we say in Swedish, and yeah, and H&M. Yes, these companies are looking into the blockchain solutions. And the fifth, the blockchain. When we talk about blockchain, we always kind of correlate the financial industry. So of course, the banks in Sweden, SEB, Handelsbanken, they are also working on the blockchain solutions. They are also looking for opportunities in that. So a lot of things are happening in Sweden. A lot of investments are there in blockchain. Developers are being hired. A lot of possibilities are being tested, and a lot of investments are coming from this industry. So coming to the next part, I want to briefly touch upon an initiative which we floated yesterday. Everyone over the mail, you came across, like online certification study circle. So this is a study circle which we are initiating to produce more blockchain developers and with having a knowledge of Hyperledger framework. And we are doing this. We are going through Hyperledger resource/training. I want to show that website to you. So most of them, yeah, I hope you can see my screen. Most of you have been through this website. So we have got different courses over there, as well as some of the trainings, as well as the higher certifications being listed here. So it is an initiative from the Hyperledger Sweden, where we'll be covering the courses which are there available from Linus Foundation, and at edX, and some of the specialized courses which are actually provided by Linus Foundation, which are intermediate and advanced training. And after that, we will try to do this certification, Hyperledger Fabric administrator, Sawtooth administrator, developer, and all. This is very much supported by the Linus Foundation, and you will be getting a lot of like discounts. And if you make a better community and a good learning community where we are producing some good results, developing some small POCs and something which is very much demonstrable. Then
sorry to interrupt, but your PPT is getting presented, not the web page.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So maybe I just share the link in the chat.
That should be fine.
That is a better option, I believe. Anyways, I have shared already the link in the thing, and you can just check it out. Maybe it's fine. I'm not able to find out the thing, but it's in the Hyperledger website. If you are in front of your, of course, you all are in the system, so you can just open it. Hyperledger.org/resources/training. In that, it has been all the courses have been listed there. So we will do.
I just dropped the link.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And so you all are very much welcome to join the community. Even you can host the same from your own meetup groups. We wanted to, and also it's a very strange time. People are working from home, so if they can devote some time every week, then we can have a good learning phase. We can have a good learning curve altogether. So if other people who are new to this Hyperledger groups and all, so it's a worldwide network. We are close to around 68,720 members. This is a number from yesterday. 178 groups, and here this is the Hyperledger Sweden. You can see it in the map. So apart from the motive of doing business consultancy as well as product or the framework evangelism from Hyperledger Sweden, we'll also conduct some community meetups so that we can discuss ideas, develop and share knowledge among each other. That's something, a sole motive for Hyperledger Sweden. So with this, that's a very short presentation from our side. With this, I pass on to our next speaker, Mr. Raymond Molnar. He will be talking on blockchain for business.
So hi everyone, this is Raymond Molnar from Vienna. I try to start my presentation. So, can you see my presentation? I hope so.
I can.
Yes.
Fine. So, hi everyone. My name is Raymond Molnar. I hope everybody's fine in the lockdown. I'm also in the home office in Vienna. I'm working at AFRY, and I'd like to present blockchain for business, and especially for hydropower. To my person, I'm a civil engineer for water management at AFRY. AFRY is a Swedish consulting firm that merged together with a Finnish consulting giant, Pöry, and we are now 17,000 consultants worldwide. Myself, I have 15 years of experience in energy business, especially hydraulic design for hydropower plants, project management, CFD, high voltage pylons, and so on. But today, blockchain is the topic, and I'd like to focus on the energy industry. Will blockchain transform the energy industry? Sure, it will. There's a German study from 2018 that was funded by big European utilities. They defined found out 91 use cases in 8 categories. One of them is the pre-qualification for balancing power market. I will introduce this in a special use case afterwards. Another use case is, for instance, asset-based electricity contracts. This is very interesting also, so it's not a flat rate, so you can decide if your dishwasher has a special electricity contract, for instance, or another interesting use case is cross-border services for electric vehicles. But there are 91 use cases. We in A3, we focused on electricity for sure. And one client project we have is the Flex Hub. It's for APG. It's the biggest Austrian transmission system operator. So they are caring about the grid, the high voltage grids in Austria. This is done by Management Consulting in Vienna. Then there's another one from Management Consulting Germany. It's the MVP Factory, due diligence tool for solar energy, solar power. Then there's kind of my baby, it's the HydroChain. This is the validation of gauge data, hydropower gauge data for from hydropower plants into the blockchain. It's done by my Viennese colleagues. And for sure, last but not least, there's the Blockchain Center of Excellence. This is the one-stop shop for all blockchain issues in A3. So I'd like to start with the use case I mentioned before. It's this Flex Hub. Can you see my mouse arrow? Yes, Flex Hub it's called. It's for the system operator. And what's the problem? Let's start with this. The grid has to be stable. This is the thing to do for a system operator, for a zone leader. But right now, a lot of new energy is entering the market, sustainable energy most of all. Here you see Austria numbers. For instance, additional wind turbines. Now there are 3 gigawatts of installed power. 2030, they are supposed to be tripling up to 9 gigawatts. So it's a lot of new facilities entering, a lot more PV power, photovoltaic installations, 50,000 units, a lot of electric cars, batteries, and all of them, I have to move this, all of this was kind of the grid before, and now there are a lot of players, a lot of power is entering the market. So the amount of flexibility is rising. Right now we have this part, this kind of stage, and it will rise. But the death of flexibility is a different matter, a different thing to think about. Right now, it's the legislation in Austria is that only installed powers bigger than 5 megawatts can enter the balancing power business. But this has to change. This is kind of only the tip of the iceberg, and we like to use all of it. And this is installations under 5 megawatts, but also under 1 megawatt. And this is not that easy. Its coordination is necessary because transactions across several network levels will take place. And this is why they were choosing a blockchain solution. Why? Or how is it done? First of all, the new power facilities will connect through IoT devices, and the whole registration process, testing, approval, it's very time consuming. So this is now done automatically through the blockchain, and that's how also smaller system can integrate into this system. And why they were choosing blockchain? I think this is important for our community. It's for sure it's the inherent security and transparency. Here it leads to the reduction of transaction costs. It's highly scalable. And very important in this case is the democratic approach. That the market participant can become a validator. And here you see this is Austria. if someone, the Swedish people know where it is maybe, but it's looking like a tennis racket or a schnitzel, some people call it. This dots shall be the grid operators, and our client APG is the zone leader for all of them. So they'd like to integrate the offer and the demand, or to use it with the Flex Hub, and that's why they started it. And they can also use this additional energy to sell it on the balancing market, which is very well paid. Let's say it like this. Yeah, I hope it's not too fast. I will switch to the next topic. It's this HydroChain that I called my baby before. It's a small baby still. We are in like the MVP, in the minimal viable product phase. But what's the idea behind of this? This is really a hydropower topic. When you see in the map here, this is part of Austria, and the red triangles are hydropower plants, and these little blue dots are very small hydropower plants. And the situation, or the problem here is, especially regarding this yellow triangle, this is the biggest hydropower plant here. They are using forecasts to maximize their revenue, but with all of this lot of little hydropower plants upstream, the forecast is bad because they don't have the data from these hydropower plants, and they have to cooperate. But this is always the trouble. They don't trust each other. They don't like each other. They are competitors, so they don't exchange data. But it would be good for all of them to exchange it, and this is where the HydroChain is coming in. So we will use this yet existing data, discharge, reservoir level, water level from rivers, precipitation that's collected, and bring it into the HydroChain. But before we simply put it into a blockchain, it will be validated through a hydrological simulation. This will provide better forecast, more revenue for the power plant operators. And this validation is done through mining in the blockchain. That's the concept. We are working on it, and sure, we have a look into Hyperledger if it's the right framework. We hope so. And yeah, that's about it. That's the use cases I'd like to introduce. And if there's some questions, feel free.
I have a question.
Yes, hello.
My name is Brett Carpenter, and I'm in Oakland. Hello, I'm in Oakland County, Michigan, and I am being incubated by the county. And one of the things that I have in proposal and what I'm raising capital for is my Rohde and Schwartz working bench. Do you use Rohde and Schwartz?
Rohde and Schwartz working bench? I don't know what you're talking about. Sorry.
Okay. It's for signals. It's for signals. So I was wondering if you applied that to Hyperledger Fabric, because that's what our project is.
Mm-hmm.
So that was why I voiced up.
Okay, I can ask my colleagues, because I don't know everything about the project, but if you write me how it's spelled correctly, then in the chat, then I can ask my colleagues and send it to you, Brett Carpenter.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone has got any more questions or if you wanted to present some of the projects from your own community, you can speak up. We have around 7 minutes of gap before Marta will take up the session today. From your community, any sort of success stories or any sort of deployment from your organization. From now. Yeah.
Hi, Prajit. Hi, this Ram here.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Is anyone using invoice fraction for blockchain technology for invoice fraction?
Did you understand, Prashit, invoice?
No, I'm not using now. So it's an open forum, so anyone can unmute yourself and invoice fraction.
Yeah, if anyone has any idea about invoice discounting fraction, if anyone is using blockchain technology for invoicing, I just would like to know. Maybe not very much relevant at the moment, but I was curious to know if someone is using.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. So an open question to everyone from the European community, the Hyperledger European community, how you are connecting events or what sort of projects you are taking up. Any type of interesting thing you want to share from the European community? Would love to hear.
Hi, I have a question. Maybe this is a very broad question, but I'm just wondering what's the biggest difference between the supply chain blockchain technology and the hydro blockchain technology you just mentioned?
The supply chain, I don't know about the supply chain, but the thing with the hydropower blockchain would be that the data itself will be validated through the mining, but not the simple transactions, but the data itself will be validated through a hydrologic simulation. But maybe, Prashit, you have more ideas about the supply chain, the difference?
Yeah, that hydrological simulation, that sort of close correlations is actually a kind of a differentiating factor from the supply chain blockchain, a general supply chain blockchain. So that is the only thing I will say. And compared to the other properties and all, it looks kind of a more similar, but yeah, that is a major thing. So we need to do an analytical approach where we can trigger up, where we can actually run through a proper model and see which is come to a close correlation, because it cannot be equal. In supply chain, you need to go through that, but it cannot be equal with that. But so close correlation, we need to kind of have an upper bound or the lower bound scores. So that's how we developed the hydrogen project.
Yeah, and we are using a special hydrologic coefficient, the Kleene-Gupta coefficient, or that's special for hydropower generation.
And this is David from Hyperledger. I just dropped a couple of links in the chat. If people are interested in supply chain, we do have a supply chain special interest group that's open. You're welcome to go. They have a regular open calls and a mailing list. So please feel free to follow that link. And that's just one of many special interest groups. If people are interested in other industries, we have a number of different groups. And again, those are all open and you're welcome to get involved in those. And you can learn more about supply chain or other topics you may be interested in beyond the presentation we just heard.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. That's helpful.
Okay, Prashit, I will stop my presentation and give back to you. So thank you all for listening, and let's go on entering blockchain world.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Muller. It was a nice presentation.
Yeah. So we are just waiting for Marta. Marta, are you on the call or? She's yet to join. Actually, she's having a meeting till 6:30. So if you have anyone wanted to share anything from our community on any side or anything, then please feel free to share.
I have a question regarding the IBM Hyperledger. So is there any development community, like except the, for example, if we are developing something like the latest feature like private data collection or any new feature, so do we have any community where we can discuss about some issues we are facing?
I pass this question to David. Maybe David will be able to.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Here, I'm just pulling up a couple of links. Just 1 second, but absolutely. So. There we go. So let me know if you see the link. I'm going to drop a link into the chat. So yes, Hyperledger, and Marta will go into this in just a few minutes. So I won't say too many details, you know, because she'll repeat some of this. But yeah, Hyperledger is an open source community. All the development that happens in the community is open, so you are welcome to join, talk to other developers, you know, contribute in any way. You can submit bugs, you can submit patches, you can ask questions. So I just dropped a link to the participation section of the Hyperledger website. And if you have a chance to pull that up, that will point you to the direction of, you know, any of those sort of development-focused community tools that we have. So if you want to talk to developers, we have mailing lists. All the different Hyperledger projects like Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Indy, for example, have mailing lists. You're welcome to join those, ask questions. There's also a chat channel if you want to talk to people in real time. All the code is available online, and our public repository is the issue tracker, the same, it's online. So if you have any development focused questions, you know, yeah, we encourage you to get involved in the community, ask, introduce yourself, you know, any of these channels that I'm talking about, the mailing list or the chat channels, no invitation is necessary. You can just you know, subscribe yourself and show up, introduce yourself, ask questions. Hopefully that answered your question, but I'm happy to say more while we're waiting for Marta if you have other questions about the development side of things.
Thank you, David. Yeah. I think we can take one more last point of discussion. And Marta, if you're joining, just let me know.
Hi, Prajit.
Yeah. Hello.
I have a question. Harshad this side.
Yeah. Hello,
I just
Harshad.
wanted to check on what are possible on the POCs related to the banking. I'm basically from the banking domain, and I'm into blockchain for last 1 year almost, but I'm from UAE. And here I have seen very less adoption to blockchain for finance and banking. So particularly for Hyperledger, how is the adoption in banking and finance?
There are a lot more opportunities. If I think David can answer it really well, because from the use case perspective, David.
Yes, sorry, just unmuting. So yeah, a couple of things here that I can pull a couple other. Are people seeing the links I'm putting in the chat?
Yes, I can see them.
That's very
Great.
Yes, you can see them.
So I'll answer a couple, and it sounds like Marta's here, so she can speak more in her presentation, but I'll just really quickly. So a couple of things as far as banking goes. Again, if you look at that special interest group link, we do have some banking and finance related groups. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And then if you're curious, another good resource to see what people have done with Hyperledger, not just in banking, but across a number of industries, we have a case study library where you can see a number of different articles that really deep dive into you know, what somebody has, a challenge that somebody has solved with blockchain, you know, why they chose Hyperledger, you know, what benefits they saw, you know, what advantages and what learnings they have. So I just dropped that case study link. I would, again, if you're curious to do a deeper dive into any set of use cases, be it around supply chain or banking or whatever, I would also encourage you to take a look at those too.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you so much, David. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
everyone.
you, David.
Yeah. So Marta is in the call. So please welcome Marta Pierkeska. She will be giving us a Hyperledger and its projects overview. I'm just stopping my screen share.
Thank you. Yeah, then I'll be able to start mine. Here we go, share. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the right window to start sharing. Oh, here we go. And I do hope that my internet will keep stable, because unfortunately, you know how it goes when everybody starts working from home. I'm sure you've all experienced it. Okay, well, I thank you for waiting for me. I really apologize for the delay on here. I am very happy to share this presentation with everybody that wants it, or just with you, Prajit, and you can kind of distribute it. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, clear.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
you can hear me also. Great. Okay, so, well, thank you for coming to the first Hyperledger Swedish meetup, I guess. And I'm very excited because actually this is one of the first actual virtual meetups that I'm doing. I've spoken a couple of times virtually in other countries, but I've never actually done a big virtual meetup. So that's really cool. So let's start with why blockchain, right? Everyone wants their own blockchain because it seems like this is the way to go with trust. And World Economic Forum predicts that nearly 2.9 billions will be spent on blockchain solutions. And it will we'll see how it goes now with the economic crisis, but they were predicting that it will grow to 12.4 in 2022. So we started Hyperledger, and just to quickly dive into what is Hyperledger, I'm sure that David shared some of it with you, so you can write in chat if you want me to skip those slides. Hyperledger is a global open source collaborative effort to advance cross-industry blockchain technologies. We are hosted by the Linux Foundation, and we are one of the fastest growing projects within Linux Foundation, although we are only 3.5 years old. We are still seeing a massive momentum and great excitement over it. The Linux Foundation, many people don't really realize what Linux Foundation does. They think that it's basically there to keep Linux alive. But it's not only that. It was started 20 years ago to solve world's biggest technology problems. And does that by bringing the enterprises and the global community together to work on common frameworks, tools, solutions. So basically helps people collaborate. The starting story that I heard was that someone asked what will happen if Linus Torvalds gets hit by a bus, because there was this big community of Linux developers that were really contributing, but if they were having a personal relationship with Linus. So Linux Foundation took over. Now we have over 150 different projects within Linux Foundation. So it is a very, very big plethora of things. Some of them you may all know, so like Node.js, like cloud native computing. Some of them are very small, like LF Energy that is just starting. As I mentioned, we started 3.5, almost 4 years ago. We have 14 different projects. 3 are in 1.0, and so which means that they are in production. And there is 1 in 2.0 even, so it's more advanced. And then we'll talk about which one is which and how it goes. We have 170 meetups worldwide, which you will know because you are part of that community now. And global participation from enterprise members. We have over 250 members across the world, companies that join Hyperledger and join Hyperledger to get the benefit of PR and marketing and support and kind of guiding through the Hyperledger ecosystem. So let's talk a bit about blockchain frameworks and tools that we have. Hyperledger has a very modular approach to hosting projects. We say that Hyperledger is like a greenhouse where anybody can plant a seed of their idea, and if the community wants to feed it, to water it, it will bloom into a beautiful tree that everybody can benefit from the fruits of, right? The Linux Foundation and Hyperledger provide that infrastructure, provide that space for people to collaborate and be open and bring a beautiful, diverse, and thriving community. And this is how the greenhouse looks right now. I didn't put in my favorite slide here, which is how it looked like when I joined 3 years ago, where we had 4 projects. Now it's 13, which is pretty massive, and it is complicated. And I know that when Prajit asked me, Margaret, can you just explain what this whole greenhouse thing is and what are the different projects? I thought that, yes, this is probably the best thing to do, especially at one of the first meetups. So one of our newest projects within the distributed ledgers, so that first box that we have here, is Hyperledger Besu. It's an open source Ethereum client that is developed under Apache 2.0 license, as all projects within Hyperledger. So any project within Hyperledger, any code base, has to be under Apache 2.0 license. It is written in Java. The really interesting part of it is that it can be run both on Ethereum public networks, but also on private permission networks. It does include several consensus algorithms, and this is a thing that quite often you'll see as a theme within the Hyperledger family, if you will. Several of our projects do support different consensus mechanisms so that you can build your solution based on that distributed ledger, but tweaked to what you need, because we don't think that there is one blockchain to rule them all and one configuration to rule them all, right? And throughout the presentation, I tried to put in some videos from our Hyperledger Global Forum, where we had presentations about this project. So once you get the presentation, you can always watch them. The one that is probably most well known, and the one that is in 2.0 since January, is Hyperledger Fabric. As Brian likes to say, it's our grandfather of projects. It does support, it is a very modular network. It is very well suited for very closed, permissioned kind of business settings. And this is why it also has various consensus mechanisms, but in general, it hedges its bets on certain level of trust within that group, right? So currently, Fabric supports Kafka as consensus mechanism. They're also working on PBFT, but reason for Kafka was exactly that, to kind of say, okay, we know that there is certain level of trust, and we don't assume or try not to assume malicious actors. We only assume honest mistakes. And this is working really great. We have over 200 developers across over 100 companies contributing to Hyperledger Fabric. And it is now available across all major clouds. So we are also working on a certification process where you will be able to spin off nodes on different clouds, and they will talk to each other. So you won't be locked into one service provider. Then we have Hyperledger Sawtooth. Hyperledger Sawtooth was the second project that was initially contributed to Hyperledger. So we started with 2 and 30 companies that kind of created Hyperledger. And one of those companies was Intel, which donated Hyperledger Sawtooth. And Sawtooth is a slightly different beast. It is really focused on very kind of flexible and scalable solution with a lot of small transactions happening. It is very, very flexible in all sort of ways. It does include support for POET, Proof of Elapsed Time, although now they are very strongly moving towards a PBFT. And it does, in general, support the pluggable consensus, which means that you could theoretically implement your own consensus and plug it into Sawtooth. And it also does support on-chain governance, which we hope, as we move forward, consortia will be using to create their networks and govern them. It is in 1.0 or 1.1 even, and it does support Solidity smart contracts. So Hyperledger Fabric supports chain code and Solidity, and Hyperledger Sawtooth supports just Solidity as a smart contract mechanism. Then we have Hyperledger Indy, which is one that gained a lot of interest and a lot of traction over the last year and a half. And actually it got spin out to different projects, which we can talk about in a second. Basically, Hyperledger Indy is a blockchain for identity. And it doesn't matter if it's identity of a car, if it's an identity of a human being, if it's an identity of a company. These tools, libraries, and reusable components are able to provide you digital identities rooted on the blockchain or other distributed ledgers. That does not mean that identity information is stored on the blockchain. It's just that we can create a system that proves the provenance of information and provenance of or an authenticity of an identity information. Hyperledger Borrow is our youngest and smallest child probably. It does provide a modular blockchain client with a permissioned smart contract interpreter. So it basically helps other projects like Hyperledger Sawtooth to use the EVM and port into EVM. It does also run its own consensus, which is Tendermint, but is ported to those two projects. And then we have Hyperledger Iroha, which I think is the black horse of Hyperledger. It is being developed in mostly in Asian countries or in APAC, and that's why we don't hear in Europe that much about it, but it has a lot of already production versions of it. It is currently quite advanced. It focuses on very versatile but very small solutions. So it is implemented in C++ for tight memory control. It is portable it has mobile SDKs, so you can actually run elements of it on mobile devices. And it does look quite a lot at transactions and payments and things like that. And one of their biggest projects is with the National Bank or Central Bank of Cambodia, and they're creating kind of a digital currency that is not really like a Bitcoin or a kind of cryptocurrency. It is more currency that reflects your assets on your account, on your regular account. So two major things that happened last year was Hyperledger Fabric went live in January, and Hyperledger Besu went into active state. So they joined or they were contributed in February, no, maybe a bit earlier, maybe December, and they are already now in active state because it was a very advanced project coming from consensus. Then we have libraries, so the box on the bottom left-hand side. And there are three kind of libraries that are very big and very active. These are Aries, Ursa, and Transact. Now, it's a very interesting topic because Aries actually started off as part of Indy. And Indy had that infrastructure for blockchain-rooted peer-to-peer interactions built into it. But people said, well, you know what? There are all those really interesting things about Indy, but we don't necessarily want to build out the whole DLT. We want just that infrastructure to build blockchain-rooted interactions. And that's why Hyperledger Aries got spin out of it. So it's basically a part of Indy that is now in its own standalone project. And it does start to include things like shared cryptographic wallet and protocol for off-ledger interactions, all those little things. So these projects are working obviously very closely together, but they have their own communities. Now, Hyperledger Ursa, on the other hand, started as a lab project and a fun thing that actually we in Hyperledger also really wanted to see, which is a shared cryptographic library. We believed in security. Both the two people in Hyperledger have background in security, so we are very passionate about it. And that's how Ursa started. When it became its own project, Hyperledger Indy started heavily relying on it and kind of gave up, and that's what we wanted. We wanted projects to kind of move away from implementing their own crypto, as in cryptography, and move to something that is standardized and vetted by the community. So now, actually, when we talk about identity solutions, Hyperledger, Ursa, Aries, and Indy are like your holy triangle, and you have to use all three of them. So I hope this actually answers the question about the differences between Aries and Indy that I saw in chat. Transact, it's a really interesting aspect for Transact because it's, again, spin-off from Sawtooth, because one of the biggest or more interesting aspects of Hyperledger Sawtooth is the transaction families and transaction processing, the way that it's handling all those things. So we spin that off so that we can have now a level and its own library which people can port into different projects. But these three are the kind of the big ones. We also have Hyperledger Quilt, which is an interoperability solution. In fact, there are two interoperability solutions within Hyperledger family. One of them is still in the labs, and I'll tell you in a second what labs is. And Quilt is a very well-established project that is really kind of working on how can we do kind of how can we do atomic swaps and to kind of interact with the different ledgers. And then we have tools. Our newest one is Hyperledger Avalon, which basically is an implementation of trusted compute specification. So that's a really cool thing that happened, which is we always had a good collaboration with Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. They're our members. And although people thought that we are fighting with Ethereum community, it was never the case. We were always, you can see the Solidity support and all the projects. We were always very welcoming, and they were as well. So EEA came up with this specification because they aim to be a standardization body, and a group of people that were involved in writing that specification said, okay, right, now we have to actually build it, not only just have it on paper. And that's how Avalon started. So it enables secure movement of blockchain processing of the main chain and into trusted execution environments. So it's kind of using all of the fancy features of modern chips. And there's a very good workshop that we did at Hyperledger Global Forum, so I highly recommend watching it. The other tools that we have, because obviously we have more than that, is Caliper, Cello, and Explorer. So Cello is kind of deploying and managing and operating your blockchain. So it's kind of like Wireshark probably basically allows you to spin off your platform and then analyze it. So it's your DevOps tool. And then Hyperledger Explorer, on the other hand, is exploring the transaction level. So not what's happening in your network, but rather what is happening with the transaction, similar to Bitcoin explorers. And then Caliper is a project that started off from our performance and scalability special interest group. They started working on Codebase and then brought it as a project to the technical steering committee. And this helps, as you would expect from performance and scalability working group, it is a benchmarking framework that allows you to measure the performance of your specific blockchain implementation. So it's not saying, okay, is Hyperledger Fabric ultimately faster than Hyperledger Sawtooth? Because it means nothing. We can't say that because it depends on the nodes, the setup, how distributed your system is, and so on and so forth. So only thing that you can measure is, under these circumstances, how well my system is performing, and if I change those circumstances, will it impact the performance? And then we have domain-specific projects. And of course, if you have questions as I go, just place them in the chat, and I'm kind of peeking at it, so I can try answering them as we go. Domain-specific projects, there's only one. That's Hyperledger Grid, which came to us from Cargill, and is basically intending to provide reference implementations of supply chain solutions. So it is all anchored on existing open standards and industry best practices. We are kind of trying to experiment here if there are ways in which we can provide those kind of domain-specific, based on standards implementations that will then be able to, that you can apply to that specific domain. We'll see how it goes. And then there's Hyperledger Labs, which is kind of our R&D center here. So anybody can propose a project. Imagine going to a hackathon and building out something with your colleagues or buddies and saying, you know what, this is really cool and I would love to work more on it. And we have that initial code and I want to grow a community around it, but I'm not sure I can just put it in my GitHub account because how people would know about it. Well, you can come to Hyperledger Labs, and there is a process, and obviously we can't just accept any project, but after a certain process, if you fulfill the process, we will welcome this and will help you to build that community around it, or at least promote it, because it will be associated with Hyperledger. I'm getting a question here. Are these Hyperledger platform work cross-platform? I'm not sure what does that mean. So if you could rephrase it, that would be great. Thank you. So how to navigate Hyperledger? That is, as I said, it's a confusing space. We have certain goals. We are redefining them. It's an ongoing process, but we do want to help create enterprise-grade software and provide community-driven infrastructure. So what we want is for you to drive the development of Hyperledger and build those technical communities, help everybody kind of work around it, and then educate the public, because without education, you can't go anywhere. And how can you then build that commercial ecosystem? That's the next phase, right? So we build a framework, we build a tool, but how do we make business around it? So it is an open source collaboration, and Hyperledger is 100% technical community that is 100% open. So there's no barrier to using the code. There's no barrier to getting involved with Hyperledger. There's no barrier in contributing in any way. And it is very much driven by those technical contributors. We like to say that it's a do-ocracy. So those who do are those who get the loudest voice. And if you haven't been involved in open source before, it can be a bit intimidating to start participating. So feel free to lurk. Don't wait for an invitation. Same as you came here, come to our forums, come to our chat, and just, you know, look around, speak up if you want to, and see what happens. So Hyperledger has three elements to it. There are available tools, which are all under Common Apache license, the Common IP framework with the developer certificate of origin. We are kind of providing the setup of the tools and so on and so forth. Then we have the volunteer developers. So everybody, and I'm hoping that right now out of those 104 people we have on the call, some of you are contributing. You are building the code, you are kind of managing the individual roadmaps and have impact on where the projects are going. And then there's the Linux Foundation infrastructure team, which is me, Daniela, David, and our colleagues, which kind of help navigate the whole ecosystem and build it out. The best way to engage with Hyperledger is to start participating. Learn more from our resource center, join our community, and just, you know, explore what are the ways in which you can get involved. We have a bunch of community special interest groups, and no, it's a good one. So community special interest groups, these are focused on a special kind of vertical. So they are saying, what can we do to use, or how can we use blockchain to solve problems that we have in healthcare and telecom? How can we use blockchain to help with climate action and accounting? And so on and so forth. So if there are two people that come to those groups, there are technologists that say, I know blockchain and I want to help. And there are people that are not really that technical and not really focused on blockchain at all, but they have problems that they need solving. And that's where the whole brilliant collaboration starts, where we can actually do it. And as I said, sector groups and working groups and all of that, it's open to public. So just hop on and check out our, you know, I put in the link here. Check out the special interest groups and see which ones are most interesting. Community working groups are focused more on the technology side of things. So they say, that aspect of technology, how can we shape it across all Hyperledger distributed ledgers? So there's architecture, there's identity, there's performance and scalability. So you can kind of get the motif here. They focus on a certain aspect. They tend to be slightly more technical, but especially in like the diversity, civility, and inclusion, or learning and materials development working group, those are really welcoming to also not very technical people. If you want to start somewhere, I suggest that you start with training. We do have online self-paced courses that they are free. You can just join them on our edX platform and learn. Then if you want to take it at a step level, you can start thinking about these Hyperledger's certified Fabric and Sawtooth Administrator or Fabric Developer. These are the 3 courses that we have, and these are professional courses. So these are things which will be recognized by your future employers. If you want to talk to us and to talk to the community, use the chat. That's where all the kind of live communication is happening. There are loads of channels, so be sure to find the right channel. These are defined in the chat, and also you can find them on the wiki. And just, introduce yourself and start chatting to people. See what can come out of it. And then there is wiki. Wiki is where we have our more technical, or the core of interactions of Hyperledger community is on wiki. Let me put it that way. So this is where you read about the current roadmaps of our projects. This is where special interest groups that run their kind of operations. So you'll see you'll find the recordings of our calls, and can engage with the group, and so on and so forth. And Hyperledger is a bit like choose your own adventure. So if you want to contribute, you have it's very simplified, by the way. I was trying to find a way to show you that there are many ways to contribute. You can code, you can write, and you can participate in our meetings. And there are various ways, and the slide is self-explanatory. In fact, you can click all of those and boxes, and it will take you to the right place on the website. And yes, I will be sending the deck to everybody, just so that you don't have to take notes at all now. So if you want to code, take a look at our wiki, and then you'll go to further the projects and where can you find the contributor kind of roadmaps. Sorry. So let's move quickly to some new global use cases. What are the things that people have been doing? If you're interested, go to our vendor directory. That's where we put information about our members that are building on Hyperledger and their projects. So it is kind of very good resource, and we have over 85 different vendors that are building multiple projects, not a single one, right? Another place to find interesting resource is Blockchain Showcase. And in fact, if you have a project on Hyperledger that you would like to submit, feel free to do it. Blockchain Showcase is where we are trying to show the world how powerful and how big our community is, and we want to promote every project, from a POC all the way to, production, from someone, sitting in Cambridge on their laptop, all the way to big companies. And Hyperledger is a very wide ecosystem. We embrace a full spectrum of use cases. We basically, anywhere that there is a need for trust, decentralization, and proofs of provenance, you'll find Hyperledger. And each of those topics represent a potentially unique opportunity. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of Hyperledger Fabric implementations out there. So currently, according to Forbes, over half of Forbes blockchain 50 is built on Hyperledger. And that's not only Hyperledger Fabric, it's all Hyperledger frameworks and tools. One of the newest use cases that we've done is with Honeywell. You can read the whole case study. So we work on excellent case studies on regular basis and try to go in depth with the solution. So it's not just your basic, oh, they did an aerospace marketplace, but it's actually a 4-page long kind of dive into it where you can understand how the technology works and so on. In addition, you can watch the keynote that was kind of also included Lisa from Honeywell. Other industry use cases we have are with Change Healthcare. There is one with blockchain technology partners. Actually, they've just done a recent deployment with Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, which I didn't include here. I kind of ran out of time and didn't want to put in too many projects. And then British Columbia is a big one for us, where the government of British Columbia is just hedging their bets on blockchain. They started with their focus on management of small to medium enterprises and how can you verify identity of those and then to help them interact with government. And now they're moving to clean energy and kind of climate action stuff. Another project is with Secure Key. That's very interesting one. It basically helps, the Verified.me is a network in Canada that allows you to build a privacy enhanced services that allows you customers to assert identity information about trusted providers. They use a very cool technology. You can actually watch the video and look at the slides from our Hyperledger Global Forum. So I put in they are both clickable, but also you can scan the QR code. Trying to be modern here. Another project that we have is with that we know of that is very interesting is ScanTrust. ScanTrust is a company that actually started looking at QR codes and looked at how can they build a QR code system that is replicable. So if you take a snap of their QR code, it will not be identical to the one that is printed on any kind of label. So one of the projects, they did one with Colombian coffee, and another one that just recently they revealed with Unilever was tracking pork supply chain, because people nowadays really want to have clean pork or healthy pork, and they want to know what their pork is eating. That's where where the use case came from, and they've built the whole thing, and now you can actually have a full proof of the food provenance throughout throughout their journey. So I mentioned the org book, the use case in Canada as well. So this is where you can build a trusted digital network of verifiable data. And they are actually moving now into kind of a full-on system where it will be running as a primary kind of management system for companies. Another project that has been done was with China Minsheng Bank, where they worked on letters of credit, and they actually completed a 1 million letter of credit transaction. It's interesting because it does remove this need for SWIFT, which is kind of challenging from the business perspective. SWIFT doesn't necessarily want to go away, but they have their own projects as well. They are looking into how to incorporate their business model in the new world with blockchain. And one last one. I'm not going to bore you with more. In the slide deck itself, you will find a lot of those use cases. I put much more than we could talk about here. This Kiwa is a great project because it really helps the world, and that's something that I'm really passionate about. I want to make sure that it's not just technology that allows us to kind of, earn big money and whatever. It's something that helps and moves the world forward. So Kiwa built a credit bureau for people in Sierra Leone, because it turned out that only I think 20% of people in Sierra Leone had access to bank accounts, and through that to borrowing money or to lending. So that also means that the rates are much better. They are currently deploying it with central bank, where they are using Hyperledger Fabric for a shared decentralized credit reporting. So I'll end with that and open the floor to any questions. I've been seeing questions popping in the chat, so I'll scroll quickly through it. And yeah, just if you want to ask question, you can also speak up.
So I'd like to ask a really quick question. Why would any developer ever develop for Hyperledger instead of developing for an open blockchain where it's not controlled by one entity? The whole idea of a blockchain.
Sure. So there is a spectrum, and in some cases where it's a cryptocurrency, of course, you want a permissionless public network where anybody can join. But that's just one kind of very specific application of blockchain. It's a great one, and it's probably one of the better use cases we found up to date. But then there's the whole other part, which is you want the distributed technology. You want the proofs of provenance, of authenticity, and so on and so forth. You want a system that is not centralized, and you want a system that is easily auditable. And that happens to be in the heart of blockchain and is independent of being permissioned or permissionless or public or private. And in case, like the very other spectrum of things is, say, medical records. I don't think that you would want to store your medical records on a public permissionless blockchain, or even off-chain, but in a way where people can amend or change your medical records. That actually defeats the purpose of blockchain and its trustworthiness. So in those cases, you really want to focus on something that is more closed, where only, say, doctors and nurses are the ones who can input information, and you and your family can access that information. And that's why we have that one. And then we do have the middle ground with public permissioned networks, where quite intuitively university degrees and certification is a really good explanation here. Only certain universities should be able to award degrees, right? You have to be accredited and all that stuff. But anybody should be able to verify that, I have a PhD and what this PhD is in, and so on and so forth. And currently it's a completely manual process. So that's where, you have permission systems, so only certain people can write to the blockchain, but it's public, anybody can see. So why would developer, sorry, it's a long answer. Why would the developer want to develop or work on Hyperledger distributed ledgers? If you are interested in something that is not cryptocurrency, if you want to kind of explore the enterprise business side of things, well, that's a place to be. And it's not like either or. It's rather a community, it's a group of things. And a lot of solutions that we are seeing today is combining permissionless public network like a Bitcoin or Ethereum network, and then a permissioned network for the other part of it. So kind of choosing the best of two worlds.
So I have a follow-up. I didn't want to interrupt. I understand everything you're saying, but in software there is an expression GIGO. Garbage in, garbage out. For example, I don't know if you know your application that was developed on Hyperledger for the oil in Whole Foods. In Whole Foods. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know of one that S&P developed as S&P Global Platts for tracking the
Exactly.
oil.
So I'm just
Yeah.
going to use it as an example. If I put in that I grew, this particular olive tree, there is no way on a permission blockchain like Hyperledger to know that I'm lying about it.
Well, on any blockchain, you can't know if you're lying or not. Anybody, if you have a permissionless, sorry, go on.
It is not true. There are such things as oracles. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of oracles. And if you're able
I
to,
am.
Good. Then if you're able to get a decentralized oracle that can verify that I actually grew that tree through an independent sources, then it's not garbage in, garbage out, as it is right now on anything that is a permission private blockchain like Hyperledger.
So when it comes to oracles, actually oracles work really well with any kind of distributed ledgers. So you can use oracles with Fabric, with Quorum, with anything. So that's kind of, it's the same thing. You can use it. I do understand what you're saying. Also, distributed oracles is not a problem that we've actually managed to solve, or at least I haven't heard of a good solution to it. It is still the barrier of having trust. And any kind of information that we put on a blockchain has to be audited and has to be verified. And it's actually not garbage in, garbage out. It's garbage in, garbage forever, which is even worse. But that's actually why in permission setting, you have an interesting part of it, because it means that there is only a certain number of participants that can write to that network. And if they start putting in garbage, well, you know whom to eliminate. You know those participants, or at least you know their kind of placement, right? So you know how to eliminate the bad actor, or an actor that is just not knowing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind, I'm happy to have a conversation with you offline, or we can arrange a call. But there are so many other questions. I would like to make sure that everybody gets a
Absolutely.
chance.
I'll just leave behind after the thing, and maybe we can exchange some kind of information. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great. Anyone has got any more questions to Marta? Please ask.
So I see here, I want to build an app, but don't know, want to be bound to one specific DLT. Is there some agnostic platform where we can migrate regardless of, so the question is if there is a platform that is blockchain or DLT agnostic on which you can build your own app. The answer is there are marketplaces and solutions for it. Basically, what people do when they want to be blockchain agnostic is they build it so that it's blockchain agnostic, and then you can plug in. But that's apps on top of whatever blockchain would be running, rather than an app using blockchain. I'm looking here. If there are any other questions, go on. I'm just reading through the chat.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself. If anyone has got any questions, you can unmute yourself and speak up.
I have a question regarding the IBM Hyperledger Fabric. Like in the 2.2, they have introduced this private data collections, and we can create like so many private data collections, so many policies we can write instead of creating multiple channels. So what is the limitation of creating that much policy, so much private data collection? What's the limitation of that? Like how many private data collection we can make?
That is such a specific question that I'm happy to find it in the document. No, it's not even that I lack technical knowledge, but it's a very specific aspect of a specific. So if you don't mind, you can either ask on chat on our chat, or I can look for you in the documentation, because that's probably where you'll find it very well defined.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
May I?
Yes, please.
You can hear me? I'm very interested in Hyperledger Fabric, and I'm building already on it something. And if I take a look into the Linux Foundation, there is nothing as close as to Hyperledger Fabric, especially to Hyperledger Fabric, as it is the Cloud Native Foundation and the Kubernetes project. Kubernetes looks almost like our project. 80% of the technology is the same.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize this, but this is a fact. I mean, we both implemented the Raft consensus, which is now standard in Hyperledger Fabric. And I have a question: will there be in future some development that maybe for us, for Hyperledger Fabric, that this both projects maybe grow a little bit more together? Because in the moment it is extremely difficult to implement to deploy Hyperledger Fabric, and especially if you want to use some extras, and if you have several nodes, and to protect all this, and especially to build it on bare metal is extremely demanding. So my question is, because both is Linux Foundation and both are very, very similar, is there in future is there some future development that we can look ahead?
So I would precisely check the roadmap in general. So that's on Wiki. There is a lot of interesting work done there. We actually had a very good webinar a while ago talking about bringing Kubernetes and Sawtooth together and working between the two of them. I am not aware of any kind of movement towards merging Hyperledger Fabric and Kubernetes. Definitely there is a lot of work going on to make development easier and making more developer friendly. And yes, in general, what we are trying to do within the Linux Foundation is work cross platforms or cross projects. So we have a very close collaboration with CNCF. We're developing close collaboration with LF Energy and so on and so forth.
I'm hosting also the meetups in Vienna and Bratislava. And I did the last time a presentation about Hyperledger Fabric and microservices, and why Hyperledger Fabric can help to synchronize microservices. And again, when we talk about microservices, we're talking about also about Kubernetes. And from my point of view, and from the point of view of people who are doing what I'm doing, Kubernetes is the next level of operating system. We are treating this as operating system. Okay, it's not a container orchestration, which of course it is, but this is not how we call it. Yeah, for AI programmers and for us, for example, we are treating this as an operating system. So if you take these both together, yeah, the Hyperledger Fabric and Kubernetes, from my point of view, and I have actual degree in logistics, and I'm doing logistics in-house and supply chain management. And if you merge them together, what you actually get is something that's much more powerful than SAP can ever be. So I don't know. I would like to make a meetup maybe on this topic, how similar these both projects are, and actually they have to solve very similar problems that we have to solve too. For example, protect the Raft consensus from the view of cybersecurity. It's something that both have to do. Handling a lot of data throughput, because the etcd file is distributed value store database is limited to a certain amount of transaction, and so on and so on and so on. I mean, maybe somebody, and you are the director of the ecosystem, so maybe you would like to point out with your colleagues and maybe talk next time about this, because one more time, this is not about merging two successful subjects together. They belong together, and they belong together in a very, very big area.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Definitely, we can look into that, and we can actually host something like a webinar globally. That's, of course, we can think of something in future. So, Marta, we are overshooting time and all, but if anyone has got any questions,
I have. Okay.
Yeah, feel free to just drop a mail rather. And
yeah, I'm just trying to actually display contact details so
Absolutely,
that you can just directly email me. I'm just trying to find a slide where I had it, you know how it goes.
Otherwise, we can share your email ID, yeah, maybe, or something.
Yeah, I can just put it in the chat as well.
Yes, absolutely. That will be nice.
Yeah, and yes, to all the questions, the recording will be given out afterwards. Yes, it will be. We are putting it on YouTube, and yes, there will be a link underneath to the presentation so that you can use the slides and so on.
Yes, absolutely.
So my email is very simple. It's marta@linuxfoundation.org. .org. Here you go. And you can find me on Telegram and other things as well, if you need.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for organizing. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marta, for your presentation. It was really a very insightful one, I believe. And I like to thank you. I like to thank every participants, and please do join our future events in Hyperledger Sweden. And we can do also a lot of collaboration between different meetup groups. And thank you so much once again. And you can see this recording in the YouTube. Take care, be healthy and safe.